Jules, a resident who wants to join. Anyway, live chat.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, welcome to this meeting of the Housing and Regeneration Scrutiny Panel, which is the last meeting of this municipal year and the last meeting of this iteration of the panel. So just to note that this meeting is being filmed and recorded by the council for broadcast now, and it will be obviously available online to view. So anyone attending the meeting can also record it using any communication methods. So we ask members of the public who do record, film or report on the meeting not to include public seating areas, but we can't guarantee that people who do attend, we haven't got any members of the public here today, will not be filmed or recorded by others attending the meeting. Okay. Right, we don't have any members of the public participating in the meeting by deputations, so I did my second.
I please have two members of the public who want to join the meeting virtually.
Okay.
They usually would give you notice. I mean, technically you can turn up to meetings, or really, I suppose we should just.
Under normal circumstances, in a public, a face-to-face, in an entirely face-to-face meeting, people would be able to join the meeting and sit in the public seating area to view the meeting. So if that's what they want to do, then that's fine. They haven't asked to address the.
Yes, they'll be able to ask questions. They're not able to ask questions unless they request it in advance.
That's right. So if we can put them in the virtual public seating area, that would be ideal. Thank you very much, Philip. Okay. So particularly for those members of the public who've just joined, just to say, by entering the meeting room using the public seating area, virtual, you're consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recording. I've got the discretion to terminate or suspend filming or recording if, in my opinion as chair, continuation of filming, recording or reporting would disrupt or prejudice the proceedings, infringe the rights of any individual, or may lead to the breach of a legal obligation by the council. Okay. So apologies for absence.
So we apologies from Councillor Hearn, who's attending the meeting virtually.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so apologies for absence from Councillor Hearn, who's attending virtually. We don't have any urgent business, I don't believe. So that's item 3 dispensed with. Declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest? Councillor Eberly.
So I'd like to declare potential personal interest in item number, where is it? Item number 9. It relates to Knoll Park pods, and my mother is a tenant on Knoll Park estate with a pod and a undersized kitchen. So I will be recusing myself for that part of the meeting.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So that's for item 9. Deputations, petitions, presentations, questions. We don't have any of those.
No.
Okay, so moving swiftly on to item 6, the minutes. They're found from pages 1 to 10 of the agenda pack. Right, so are we happy to approve those, first of all, as an accurate record of our last meeting?
Agreed.
Okay, so that's agreed. And do we have any comments or any matters arising rather from those minutes?
Sorry, there was a typo on page 3 where the word unite was used, and I don't know what that meant.
Okay.
The second, third.
So welcome to Councillor Hare, who's just joined the meeting. Word unite. Page 3.
I'm assuming that means neighbouring units on the site.
I believe that that's the case.
Yeah, that would be one of the things. Yes, I couldn't think of the.
Okay.
Then there was any updates on the next line, which is about I suspect not.
The next line, are you asking environmental studies from Castle?
Yes, I wondered if they.
Okay, that isn't actually down as an action in the minutes.
No, just no.
We can ask that question, maybe make that an action point from this meeting. Okay, so environmental studies from Catalyst, that's an outstanding request. Okay. Any other matters arising?
Just check regarding that environmental study. Is that referring to the loss of light and view from Warwick Gardens?
I don't recall, to be very honest with you. I mean, that seems very plausible in terms of the context of the deputation, but I don't remember.
Okay, so as part of that action point then, clarification on whether that relates to the loss of light for residents in Warwick Gardens.
Yeah.
In terms of item C on that, then it says the chair advised the deputation party that he will provide a response. It's just confirmation that was provided. On page
Okay,
3.
no, I haven't provided that response yet. So that's another action for me. Okay, any further matters arising? Okay. That is the minutes out of the way. So next item is an update on council's housing delivery programme. Robbie, are you provide an introduction?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. It's been a while since I've given an update to scrutiny, but very pleased that there's quite a few highlights I guess I could share. As of today, I know in your papers it says 1,011 homes on site. Actually, as of Friday, we now have 1,202 homes on site, with the latest progress made when we completed the Hale Wolf deal on Friday. The site had actually been on site for some time. And the piling works are now going on there to establish the foundations. So if anyone who fancies a trip to Tottenham Hale, you can see some real activity happening there on site. And by the 31st of March, we are forecasting this number will get to 1289, maybe a few more. But with demolition works about to start at Remington Road, we're about to complete at Crawley Road, works to start at what's close, Jackson's Road, Redlands, the two Lansdowne Road sites on Topham Square. So, you know, a real array of activity happening. I think we're all slightly concerned about the hockey stick that we had in terms of growth numbers that we deliver in February and March. I think the team have done a really good job. If you think about, we didn't have a housing delivery team 4 years ago, and now we've got 1,200 homes on site. I think that's a real testament to the hard work of the team and something that they should be congratulated on. In terms of handovers, to date we've handed over 173 homes, and we are expecting a further 20 to hand over by the end of this month. We're also not just building the first 1,000 homes, but the next 1,000 homes and the next 1,000 after that. So we've readjusted the expectations of our programme to deliver 3,000 council homes over the next 10 years. The HRA programme at the moment, so the financial package that we took through the MTFS supports the development of just under 3,900 homes, of which 3,200 are assumed to be council homes and council rents. That's in terms of what we've currently got programmed, we've currently got in terms of sites that have either been completed, are on site or under active development. We have 3,463 homes, of which just shy of 3,000, 2,919 are currently council homes within that programme, and 544 for market sale. And so in terms of percentage affordable, we've moved the programme from, about 2 years ago, we were at about 60% homes for council rent. We're now at 83%. So as you can see, real progress going in the right direction. And I think you would struggle to find a neighbouring local authority or indeed another local authority who's delivering quite as many affordable homes as we are. And indeed quite as many of those affordable homes being council homes rather than a mix of sort of intermediate and social rented homes. So I think we've got a lot to be proud of. And while the numbers are important, the quality I think is more important. All of our schemes are getting as close as we possibly can to net zero carbon. We've got Edith Road, which will be our first scheme that will actually achieve it. We've got a few more in the pipeline that we think will hit it and get very, very close to it. We've done a great deal of work to really establish our bespoke housing programme, where we design and build homes specifically around the individual needs of our residents. And to date, we've identified nearly 200 residents to benefit from the programme. And we've already bespoke built and adapted homes at Charrington Place, Rosa Luxembourg Apartments and Joy Gardner House. Most of all, we've built up the capacity and the capability, not yet, like I said, not just to deliver 1,000 homes, the next 1,000. So this becomes, this becomes something that we do as a council. It's not a special project anymore, it's just part of the everyday activities of the council. We've now got 40 dedicated officers on the housing delivery team, which is sort of a blend, I guess, of some really experienced officers, some programme management professionals, but also officers that we've taken through our Grow Your Own scheme, where we're taking people from other parts of the council and who've got brilliant other skills and train them up as development professionals. Since I last updated, we've been shortlisted for the Inside Housing London Development Team of the Year, and we've been shortlisted for Council of the Year and House Builder of the Year at the UK Housing Awards. So there is some external recognition of what we're doing as well. And post March, once we've hopefully got somewhere around 30, maybe 1,300, maybe a few more homes on site by the end of March, and we're working on developing the next phase of our programme. I'll probably leave it there, and I'll look forward to any questions that committee might have.
Great, thank you very much, Robbie, and that's very positive news, I think. Really a tribute to the work of officers and the kind of political team that put this in place. So thank you very much for that update. I'll start off. I guess this is just a clarification. I think I know the answer to, but I think I want to make it explicit. When I look at the graphs on page 12 and 13, we see the flattening curve of delivery. And I think I know the answer to this, but I just want it to be stated quite clearly for the minute that this doesn't represent a kind of tailing off in the number of houses that we're building in the future. It's just that this shows what we've actually got specifically planned now, project that we've got.
Yeah, that's pipeline at the moment, and there's we know that we've still got some work to do to look at the pipeline post 2027, but you've generally got quite a good idea of what your future 5 years look like. At the moment, the HRA plan has identified the capacity for those 3,000 council homes. I think as we start to look at a potentially bigger pipeline, we can then look at our financial planning alongside that. But at the moment, we have only got those 3,000 council homes, but that doesn't mean that can't change as we develop our plans in the future.
Great, thanks for that. Okay, I saw Bob's hand up first.
Just about the net zero, how do you, firstly, what definition do you use? This isn't a critical question, I'm just curious.
So net zero, we'd be talking about operating carbon. So it would literally be that, to achieve net zero, the building has to be generating more energy than it takes to run it, which is obviously, in terms of net zero, that's why it's so hard to get there, particularly in our larger scale schemes. But a lot of our schemes, while they're not quite hitting net zero, they're seeing sort of 80-90% reductions against building standards. we are delivering much higher sustainability specification than I said almost anyone else in the marketplace.
Jen, may I just ask a bit more about that? So is that partly because a number of the homes are going to be taking energy or heat directly from the proposed facility? How does it, where do they get their heat or their energy from?
So not all by any stretch of the imagination. There are some which will be getting their heat from the district energy network,
Yeah.
but quite a lot will be getting their heat from air source heat pumps as well. I mean, the fabric, so we take a fabric first approach. So the fabric first approach means that we're starting from a sort of very high base of airtightness, so their heating requirements are quite low. Then we'll also try and do whatever we can through on-site photovoltaics as well.
Yeah.
And so where you've got schemes that aren't too dense, that can take us to net zero, but also, other schemes we're looking to target net zero through the district energy network again, which would be considered a zero carbon heat source.
One further follow-up.
Well, if you like, others come in and I'll sort my.
No, it's
So I
fine.
haven't got it properly formed at the moment.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's all about energy. So,
You want some time to think?
yeah, I'll think about it and let others come in.
Okay. See if I just talk Charles first, and then Bill.
Thank you. I just really want to know how to phrase this, but maybe to compliment you and the former cabinet member for housing, obviously the director as well, because from where we started from 0 point in 2018, and then we had a pandemic and the formulation of the team, as it were, and even where we are, a lot of our critics seem to be, have forgotten, as it were, and claiming the glory of it. And I'm so pleased that you've been nominated for a number of awards, which is wonderful. I was wondering, it's not a party political stuff. I'm wondering if the council has done anything to actually highlight what we've done in terms of the achievements of this council, both from a political and officer point of view, from where we started. You mentioned it compared to other London boroughs, where we are currently. And I'm pleased in terms of the work that's been done. In terms of the question, then, are we at full strength in terms of capacity from where we started with recruitment of officers to form that initial team to take the projects forward?
We still probably could do with a few more. I wouldn't, we can all, you can never quite have enough project managers because you lose them as quickly as you recruit them. So look, I would say we're in a much better place. We certainly have enough people to deliver our program, but we're still working through putting the right permanent structure, with all the restructures that we're seeing in housing at the moment. But we're getting there. We're pretty close.
So in terms of the capacity then, and the energy stuff that Councillor Hare mentioned, I know he's still trying to frame some questions.
No, it's not. They're not critical questions.
No, it doesn't matter whether they're critical or not, but it does help in terms of taking the projects forward, given where we are. That we will be, in terms of the next steps, fully compliant with the energy aspect of the various projects.
Well, it's worth actually adding on energy. What we have actually recently created new employees requirements for the team. And so our working assumption on projects going forwards, and obviously there's some catch up with the existing program, is that all schemes will target net zero, and if they derogate, the reasons for derogation need to come to Council Housing Delivery Board, which is the sort of structure which oversees the programme from an officer perspective. And we're also assuming that all schemes will be passive house, with derogation again having to come to Council Housing Delivery Board. So in terms of the sort of ambition around carbon target, it's very high. We know that we won't be able to meet it on every single individual site. It's just, you know, there's some where it's not physically possible. There are others, quite frankly, where to make a small change, it's not financially practical. But, you know, this is, you know, sustainability is absolutely at the core of the programme and a key target for us going forward.
Thank you.
Thanks. Dawn, you were next.
I just wanted to ask a question. I'm not sure, Robbie, whether you can answer this or not really, but we have, is it 10,000 families on the waiting list for housing and obviously 3,000 homes by whenever that was in 10 years' time. In terms of finding capacity for building more homes, how confident are you that that demand has a chance of being met? Because obviously there's not a lot of land kicking about at the moment.
Look, it's a real challenge, and we're not the only ones who face that challenge. You know, we'll, as always, we will use all methods at our disposal, whether that's direct delivery on our own land, buying other people's land, as we've done at Chocolate Factory Mallow Place, acquiring homes as part of Section 106. But we've got to remember that we are, you know, the council can do a lot, but we can't be the only people who are delivering the homes that our borough needs. We also need housing associations and other developers to step up, deliver housing, deliver affordable housing as well. So we can do a big chunk, but it's 11,700 people on our waiting list. And yeah,
Not going to get thrown down.
and so all we can do is we need to do everything at our disposal, whether it's doing things ourselves or working with partners to deliver as many homes as we physically can, of great quality, as quickly as we can, deliver them at great quality, if that makes sense. And so that's we are mobilising as quickly as we can. I think if you compare the speed, I was in Camden a few weeks ago, and I noticed that Camden are very close to having their 1,000th council home on site, and they've been going since 2012.
Yes.
And so the fact that, you know, okay, they've certainly delivered more homes than us, but not with more council homes on site. So if you look at the sort of speed that we're moving, I think, you know, there's been a lot of work done very quickly to get a programme together, and we will deliver as quickly as we can, and our residents are right to be impatient, and we should be impatient on behalf of our residents as well. But, you know, there is only so much we can do as quickly as we can.
But no, it was more of a question about the land as well, because it is obviously limited, and it doesn't matter whether you're council delivering or private developers. There's a limit to that, and that may be why Camden's had a challenge, because it's even denser than we are, so to speak. So I just wondered, and it may be a question for a future cabinet member about how we can help to free that land up, whether that's private or council delivery.
I think that there are always sites that come up. You know, we sometimes, you know, we need to challenge more of the uses that sit on the sites as they are. I think we're a while away from where we'll struggle to find the land to deliver. I'm not saying it won't happen, but you know, I think we're some way away from that at this point in time.
No, you next.
Thank you very much for this report, and it is really gratifying to see this starting to take shape. Really, really good. And it's great that we've clearly built a team which is capable of leading this project. Car free, I mean, that is really good to see. But we're taking the lead on that. And particularly as we're moving towards low traffic, hopefully, low traffic neighbourhoods, that is going to fit in with that aim of healthier travelling. District energy network. What is the source of power for the district energy network?
That's it's city plants at Edmonton, isn't it?
Right. So, just to put it here, that is far from carbon neutral and is much worse than just directly plugging into the grid, because everything from the incinerator is from stuff that's burnt. Every bolt and every amp is from stuff that's burnt. If you plug into the grid, a lot of the grid is now decarbonised. Can't remember the exact amount, but a lot of it is decarbonised. So in actual fact, obviously, this is a political matter that needs to be taken up elsewhere. But our homes being plugged into the district energy network is contributing to burning the planet, and this is something that needs to be addressed.
David wants to comment.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not here to obviously debate the ins and outs of that. I suppose the crucial point to make, of course, is that the source of heat is the waste heat from that facility. So obviously there's a debate about whether you have that facility or not.
Yeah.
But if that facility is going to be there, I think the intention is to basically use the heat that would otherwise be wasted to power our district energy network. But the other thing to say is that the team have done quite a lot of work, the sustainability team, to look at how you could convert that then to other sources of energy, particularly sort of heat pumps and the like.
Yeah.
So it's not impossible that that district energy network could be powered by an alternative source in the future. But clearly, if you're going to have that facility there, if it's there, then you may as well use the excess heat from it, I think, is the logic. But that's
And waste to grid, is generally accepted, in London Plan, in sort of UK standards as zero carbon. It's a debate as to whether you feel that's right. But as far as is generally accepted in policy, is generally accepted in policy as a zero carbon heat source, because it's emissions that would have happened otherwise. We're just taking the waste heat from that.
It's quite interesting, isn't it? Because you always think that sums are, they're just numbers and disputable, but actually it depends on the basis on which your sums are done. So I mean, my views on the Edmonton incinerator in a matter of public record, because I've spoken in full council on it, but it's noticeable that it really depends on whether you're seeing that that rubbish being burned as just being a fact that's there, and I totally see that makes perfect sense, and if that's the case, then it counts as carbon neutral. But if you on the other hand, you look at it as a heat source and an energy source, it's actually quite inefficient compared to other ways of heating our homes. So I think this then becomes a political question, actually, and it's something that needs to be discussed with the cabinet member for housing delivery, with the cabinet member for climate change, and maybe we've gone as far as we can with this discussion with officers. But it is a very, very interesting question, I have to say. But I'm quite reassured to hear that there are other potential ways of powering a district energy network, and that were political decisions to be made at some point in the future to dispense with the Edmonton incinerator, that wouldn't necessarily throw our housing delivery plans into complete meltdown.
Look, there's a wide array of ways you can create a district energy network. Some forms are more efficient than others, some are more financially viable than others, but from a sort of practical perspective, there are lots of different sources you can use.
Thanks for that. You have a question?
No, I didn't. No, not at all.
Okay.
I'm very happy.
You formulated your.
Yeah, but it's a really interesting question about the incinerator. And another facet is that using heat rather than electricity, which is pretty sort of valuable way of distribution of energy, using heat requires quite an investment in piping heat infrastructure, transference and insulation. Once you've got that, it isn't as flexible as you would like in the sense of being able to switch it off. And I think that there may be a problem with the incinerator. I know this is a different debate, because as the amount of energy in our waste decreases, supplying the incinerator becomes an environmental issue. So perhaps just comment that to you as on the record, so to speak. But my question was that is anyone looking at the costs of building and also the costs of perhaps demolishing and then rebuilding? So is anyone looking at the cost, even if it comes out better in the long run? Is anyone looking at the negative side that you've got to pay back?
So you're talking about
the cost of the energy carbon cost of demolition.
Well, I mean, we're also looking at the financial cost, and it's very rare. It's, you know, there are very rare times where you know, if you notice, there isn't a lot of demolition in the program at the moment. You know, I can only really think of 2 substantial schemes and 1 or 2 other smaller schemes.
Love Lane
and Broadwater Farm.
But Broadwater Farm specifically.
We have no choice. I understand. We have absolutely no choice.
Yeah.
Broadwater.
Yeah, and then you know, there are very few other places where we are looking at the prospect, but we are only looking at the prospect where the buildings are unfit to be used in their current environment, because it's not just costly from a sort of embodied carbon perspective. It's actually quite costly. Yeah.
So in fact, money, as often the case, like with driving a car, is another measure of the environment. It costs you a lot, but it's not a good idea to use it. Okay, thanks very much, Rory.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. I just have one other question, which is actually for the cabinet member. But just if we could ask, I know it's been mentioned before. Question asked about whether there have been any discussions, any investigation into setting up a direct labour organisation for delivering council homes, and I just like to ask the cabinet member who unfortunately can't be here today due to a meeting clash.
We can ask the officers that, can't we?
I would like to hear from the cabinet member about her plans. It's a political decision, I think.
Chair, I'm sure whatever question you ask can be put.
Okay.
There might be an answer.
If you'd like to put that to the officers.
I think we're a little bit away from our capabilities being there. You know, we've just about established a delivery team. We're starting to, you know, I think what we're starting on is we're starting to bring design resources, planning resources, program management resources, aftercare resources. So we are beefing up the team. I think I think we are some way from being able to set up a direct local organisation to deliver housing. And I would let our programme grow and our capabilities grow, I think, before we go down that route. Because we're talking about just almost £1.5 billion worth of 10 years. I think we would struggle to deliver that ourselves. There may well come a day where we might have a direct labour organisation, but I would say that short to medium term, I would counsel against it.
So I suppose my question would be, it's not about whether it can happen in 2 years' time, in 3 years' time. My question would be what you just said. Is there, can you envisage something like that being something that could be delivered some way in the future?
Sometime in the future. If I don't have to give you a date, look,
Don't give you. I'm not asking for a date.
Look, it's not. It's actually got. It's. I think our biggest priority at the moment is really getting us developing and delivering again. Yes, it may well make. I think one of the things that we're looking at, and I'm sure we'll come back to a future scrutiny about, is how we can do more through modern methods of construction, precision manufactured homes. I think at the point that we move more towards that, you could see a scenario in which we might have a delivery organisation that do the sort of getting the kit parts together.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't consider, sort of DLO in sort of, doing traditional build. I wouldn't see that as a future of our housing delivery.
I think the other thing to say is that there's more to be done within the sort of Homes for Harrogate kind of responsive repair service.
It has a DLO.
Yeah, they have a DLO, and we need to get that as efficient and effectively as possible, and actually do more and more in-house. But that's a big challenge in itself, and I think that's probably a more realistic one to make inroads than that. And I suppose also if we were ever to get to that role, I think we'd probably be looking at some sort of London-wide approach, I would say as well, because if you think about it, most even small house builders tend, at a national level, will have large, really large programs compared to what an individual council will have. So I just think it's and then they will tend to use contractors, smaller.
I think it's worth saying that there's probably a medium step which you go down before you end up with a DLA, which at the moment we use tier 1 contractors. So we use a contractor who manages the whole build process. Probably the next stage would be for us to look at managing, tier 2 subcontractors and putting that all together before we went down the next route. And that is something that I guess it might be practical within 5 years or so.
So a follow-up to that would be, I think it's important that you mention the fact that there currently is a kind of a DLO in terms of our repair service. So a lot of that is kind of repairs to whether it's bathrooms, kitchens, things like that. So I suppose for me, the question would be a step-by-step approach where, you may not necessarily be building a house, but if you can repair a kitchen, you can fit one. Do you know what I mean?
So the DLO has in the past been responsible for planned works.
Yeah.
I think at the moment we're not looking at that model for planned works now. But I think I think within a few years as our capabilities around planned works grow, I think there may be opportunities to do more planned works in house. But at the moment, I think we've got a lot of work to do with our DLO to deliver the service that our residents deserve. And so I think the priority's got to be there first before we start to expand.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Thanks, David.
You need to.
Yeah, I'd love you to stay.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Cheers, thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone. Okay, so we can now move on to the next item, which is item 8 on the agenda. Insourcing into Harringay. We've got a report on that. Who's going to provide the introduction to that report?
Judith was on.
Judith.
Yeah, she is raising that hand.
I am. Sorry, I'm struggling slightly to hear you. It's just a slightly bad connection, so I might have to ask you to repeat questions. So, just in terms of Noel Park as an overview.
So apologies. This is item 8.
Yes, so Homes for Harringay insourcing.
Yeah,
it's just item 8.
Yes. Homes for Harringay insourcing.
Yes, that's me.
I don't think that's me, David.
Sorry. Okay, well, I'll invite you back when it's time.
Okay, so yeah, on Homes for Harringay insourcing, and apologies because I think Mark Bajan, who's been leading the programme, is unable to be here tonight, so you've got me as to introduce the report. But obviously, I've got a large role in the insourcing of Homes for Harringay, as you would expect. So the report before you really just sets out the background to the decision to bring Homes for Harringay in-house and the progress that we're making against that aim. And in particular, obviously, I think probably since the last time this committee discussed it, we've been through the resident consultation, and there was very strong support for bringing the organisation and housing services back into the council, and actually quite, a really good level of response as well. But what we've also been doing is there's a programme board that's been set up within the council to basically oversee the project plan. There's been a number of service integration workshops between different parts of Homes for Haringey and council departments to look at how we can bring the services into the council and really build on the opportunities of all being part of one organisation. I think in particular to look at the areas where we can build on the work that the Homes for Haringey transformation programme's already been doing, because I think it's important to say that we don't just sort of see a cliff edge where Homes for Haringey becomes the council and we stop there, or we also don't intend, Homes for Haringey doesn't intend to sort of cease all activity to try and improve services between now and the transfer, and that's just an important principle really to say. So as I say, we consulted 24,000 residents with during the consultation, which was back in September. We had a whole series of focus groups, estate pop-up events, online meetings to sort of speak to residents about the proposal to bring it in-house. We had, I think, 1,700 responses to the consultation, which is, pretty good, especially because I think a lot of residents we spoke to were probably sort of happy with the proposal, but probably not excited enough that they felt they had to go out and sort of submit a response. I think from that point of view, what we weren't seeing was any really substantial reasons for opposition. I think it's fair to say as well, though, that during the consultation, there were a number of frustrations expressed with things like the performance of things like repairs and, concerns around that and the need to improve that. So we also got a lot of material back from residents where, they can see that services need to improve and they can see opportunities for that once it comes back into the council. So in terms of where we are now, a lot of work based on all the workshops that have happened has been done to consult senior managers on a structure. The chief executive of the council, outgoing but also now incoming, has been running a consultation with senior managers across both Homes for Haringey and the council on structure proposals, and the proposed structure is sort of broadly outlined in the report, but broadly it's about the housing demand part of Homes for Haringey, which is obviously headed up by Denise Gandy, would move into our Adults and Health Department. The housing management and housing property services would come into housing regeneration and planning, reporting into myself under a newly created role of an operational director. And then a number of the kind of corporate functions like finance, comms, HR would go to the relevant part of the council, customers, transformation, and resources. That's a sort of initial move that will largely lift and shift. Most people's jobs will not be changed at all by that shift. But there would then be a series of further service reviews once it's within the council, because when you speak to staff, they have lots of ideas about how you can get things working more effectively, like, for instance, referrals between children's services and housing, those sorts of areas where I think all being part of one organisation offers quite a good opportunity to really build on that. In terms of the formal timescale, the report also sets out that we will be doing the sort of formal transfer of undertakings consultation, the TUPE consultation with Homes for Haringey staff in March, and then in anticipation of the TUPE transfer of staff happening on the 1st of June. And there's quite a lot of work happening around what the induction programme will be for Homes for Haringey staff, but also actually council staff, because I think we need to remember that there's not, for a lot of council staff, this is a significant change as well. To be working with an in-house housing team rather than with the within arm's length management organisation. And from July onwards, as I say, continuing with those sort of service transformation programmes, including the work that Homes for Haringey have already got underway. But also looking at further opportunities for service reviews and integration of services. If you think about things like our employment services, which some of which happen within Harringay, some of which happen within our regeneration and economic development team, there's a good opportunity to sort of look at that holistically with the two teams together. There's also both organisations have a health and safety function as another, for instance. So I think I've probably given you a bit of an overview of what's in the paper. Very obviously happy to take questions and any perspectives.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. The main question I have, David, and it's probably not really one for you, is around the customer service side, because I know that when people currently in the council customer service and they don't use the website, even if they do use the website, depending on whether it's parking or whatever, the feedback is often very bad, either that nobody answers the phone or the website fails and their transactions don't get through and they get a parking ticket, and a couple of examples. So obviously the Homes for Harringay, which team was that? Customer feedback team is the customer service team in my parlance, right? I haven't understood correctly. So will the Homes for Harringay staff, when they come over, be trained on general council queries and vice versa, or will that all be part of a call tree so that it goes to the right people? And I can see that there'll be great benefit to training people because you've got all the referrals that you've just touched on. And how confident are you? And as I say, this is what I'm not sure you can answer, is that all of those calls will be answered and everything will be correct, because people, when they've got something going wrong with their home or when they get that parking fine, really need help right now.
I think that this is a really important set of questions, and to a certain extent it sort of speaks to the issue that I spoke about in the introduction, in terms of there is already work to try and improve some of this, because I think, both in terms of our sort of main customer centre within the council, but also within the Homes for Harringay team that you mentioned, I think we're very clearly getting the message that this isn't working well enough for customers and there is a need to improve. And so, there are already a number of steps being taken, like including improving the number of, customer officers that we have within the council team to try and deal with the volumes of calls and make sure they're routed to the right places, making sure that things like scripts in the customer call centre are up to date and correct, and people know where to direct the right people. So there's already stuff happening, which hopefully is improving this. And sort of under the banner of Homes for Harringay transformation, but also I think once it comes within the council, it will all be under one council director and the director of customers transformation and resources. But obviously, that director will need to work very closely with the others, like myself and Beverly, who heads up adults, and we'll need to make sure that our teams are working really closely with that centralised function.
And is there a possibility that director could be slightly overwhelmed, or is there going to be enough support within the team overall for them? Because it's quite a change, particularly that's for everybody, but I'm just thinking from the customer point of view, when they feel the knock-on effects, we don't want increased complaints because that adds to the workload of that team. So they're the front line. Really.
Yeah, well, obviously, I suppose taking all the improvement that's happening now, including the additional resources that's going in, is about heading off that possibility, but also sort of recognising that we can't stand still once this change happens. There will have to be a lot of training put in place for staff to be able to handle those calls effectively, and make sure that actually the routes into the council services are working, because we hear time and time again that it's not working as well as it should, as one stands.
Chair, could I just have this is for you more than anybody. This is this is our last scrutiny panel in this current administration period. Could we put that down as a recommendation for the future chair of this panel, whether that be you or somebody else, that this is checked back in 6 or 9 months' time, whatever's appropriate, just to make sure that that's taking place. And it's quite a big piece of work.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, David, for the presentation. I'm looking at page 22, paragraph 4, February 2022, number of points. I'm looking at the last one, co-design of future resident engagement, service integration plans and stuff. Just an update of where you officers are on that, and who is leading on that in terms of the co-design on arrangements. That's that page. And then on page 26 and pages 26 and 27, looking at the existing structure and proposed additions. If you then go to 27 page, proposed HRP, which is used obviously. There's an existing AD capital projects and property. And then there's obviously a proposed new structure of AD housing property services. I think there needs to be a clear distinction between those two posts, because when you just talk property, members get confused, or the members of the public could get confused. They say, well, property, and then you then got this other post that talks about property services. So I think maybe, I don't know if any thought has been given to that in terms of the distinction. So this is housing rather than council property, which I think is the AD capital projects and property, which is council, not housing as such. I just need some, maybe thought should be given to that aspect of it. And then the final question in terms of the insults, whether any thought has been given to any net savings to be derived, projections, for example, in terms of the management arrangement in place with Homes for Haringey when it comes in, is always projection. It could even cost more to bring it in, but you're providing a good service because it's in-house rather than paying and not getting. So if any thought has been given, I mean, that last aspect doesn't necessarily need to be answered tonight, but we can come back to it, a written answer, if that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. All really important questions. I think first of all, in terms of the co-design work, there's been a number of sort of resident engagement sessions that have been set up, including a resident sounding board. There is also work being done with the existing Homes for Haringey structures, including this resident scrutiny panel. We've got some really engaged residents, and also some work that's been done to sort of get beyond the usual suspects that get involved in housing as well, because obviously, we know that the residents that live in our housing stock, are from many diverse communities, and they're not always represented by sort of formal representative bodies. So there's been a series of different forums to try and get residents involved. There's the programme team that's been reporting into Mark Bajan, has been leading on those reviews and looking at the sort of, I suppose, best in class across different councils and different organisations. One of the benefits of having an ALMO, I suppose, has been things like the resident scrutiny panel and the resident involvement in the board of Homes for Haringey. What we don't want to do is lose that in the new structure. So what we're trying to do is take the best parts of how residents have been involved in Homes for Haringey, but augment it with other sort of approaches. And when we report back to Cabinet for our next decision on this, we will have a set of proposals around, how we intend to take that forward. And I believe that's what we'll bring forward in sort of June or July. So that's just to sort of deal with all of that. I suppose, I take your point about the property services. I think we were sort of imaginative enough to sort of recognise that and sort of put housing property services to try and make that differentiation. But I think you make a good point that may not be enough for people to sort of see that differentiation, especially now that it's all part of one council. Obviously, the property services role within housing is overseeing our responsive repair service, is overseeing the planned maintenance programme, which is actually very, very substantial, and I think is definitely more than enough for one assistant director. But clearly we also have a really large capital programme within the council's sort of traditional property services, as you've described it, which is overseeing massive capital program, but also, you know, a number of important property transactions for things like the housing program that we've just discussed. So that's the kind of split. But we, will, you know, take your sort of comment away around, you know, whether we need to sort of do anything else to sort of demarcate the two roles. Because I see where you're coming from. In terms of net savings, I think it's important to say this, that one of the rationales for bringing Homes for Haringey in-house is not about making savings. What we have said, though, is that there will be opportunities for efficiencies, which can then mean we can redirect money back into frontline services. So, you know, today I visited the Homes for Haringey Estate Watch programme, which was really, really interesting, but also quite alarming to see the sorts of things that are happening in terms of antisocial behaviour on estates. Now, that team's doing great work, but it probably needs more resources around enforcement. So my take on it would be that there are savings to be made, particularly when you think about things like some of the corporate services, but it won't be an overall saving, because what I would want to see is that money redirected back into the frontline services like I just described.
Okay. Thanks for that. I mean, if I just maybe come back on the AD property type stuff.
Yeah.
The reason why I actually asked the question is that the number of council housing properties where you've got shops below,
Yes.
and that is managed by property services, which will come under AD capital projects and property. But although they are Homes for Haringey AI properties with housing above it, you know, so that's why I asked the question in terms of the distinction, because there's been a number, I mean, Broadwater Farm, there's history there. Yeah, where although you've got it's in the HRA, where you've got property services managing those shops, as it were, the commercial leases. So not necessarily for now, but maybe thought should be given to how that is actually dealt with going forward, since everything is coming to the council, because you don't want a situation where someone then phones in and says, well, there's a problem, there's a leak. So actually it's not housing, it's capital and property on the commercial aspect.
Yeah. Yes. No, I think that's really fair point. I mean, I would say I think some of those things already happen actually, but we need to get better on that and make sure that, you know, if there is an issue in a shop that is under a housing block, that we aren't passing it until it's closed and we're really clear about this stuff for the management of the upkeep and maintenance.
Thank you.
Yeah. The report is quite clear that the structure is work in progress, and but the organograms that are sort of in draft form in the appendix do still show quite distinct directorates, and obviously some of the teams that will be working together, hopefully more effectively, could still, if you like, suffer or be part of one directorate that wants to cling on to the money. And so it's a question, I suppose, about how will money be allocated, carrying out tasks that previously were just specifically in one team, you now realise should be part of child children's services, or how do you see that working? Because some people are going to be between what you might have called the old directorates, are going to be working very much between different people.
Yeah. So I think that's a really important question, and you are right to say that it is progressed so much so that it's currently subject to consultation, so there may be changes. But yeah, I mean, there's no getting away from the fact that the big challenge for us is going to be to make sure that we don't lose the links between the teams that are coming into the county, and that they're still able to work really effectively together. I mean, to a certain extent, that's about relationships and about everyone being committed to sort of shared values and shared approach. But from a starting perspective, the director of finance isn't intending to kind of sort of allocate, sort of just hand over all the money that comes with these services and leave it to the directors. Everything will come with a particular budget code to be monitored and to be kind of delivered against. And obviously, don't forget, a lot of stuff in this space is quite controlled by the fact that it's ring fenced within the housing revenue account, and not all of it, obviously, and there are areas, particularly within housing demand or general fund. But it's absolutely not the case that we can just start taking money that's ring fenced to housing revenue account and think actually we can spend a bit more on X, Y, or Z, because clearly it has to go to housing services. And I think that will be something that will be forefront of our mind.
My question has kind of been stolen, which was around the prospects of moving resources from the savings generated by ending duplication between into provision of improved services. And I'm really pleased to hear that that's the thinking going on, rather than actually saying, right, we can save X 100,000 and actually take it out of the service. But is there a figure on the extent of that? I mean, are we able to say, right, we are saving X £1,000 on ending a potential duplication, and that amount now being available for improving the service for tenants?
So there is, so yeah, you're quite right about the principle of this. There isn't currently a saving that the Director of Finance said you have to, or this is the amount that you're that I'm asking you to deliver as part of this. Part of the reason for that is that obviously what we're doing to start with is lifting and shifting services in. I mean, there's only actually 2 redundancies which are happening as a result of the current proposal. One is, well, sorry, not redundancies, let me express this more carefully. There are only 2 posts being deleted from the current Homes for Haringey structure. All the other posts will come across within the structures that I've set out. So to start with, there won't be massive savings to be made there. I think we'll be doing our tenants and leaseholders a disservice that we didn't then look through service reviews to find savings to then put back to frontline housing services. But at this stage, we don't have targets against that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, any more questions? No? Okay, thank you very much, David. Right, let me just find my place in the papers. I think this is the moment that Amelia wanted to leave the meeting at this point.
Yes.
So there's a yeah. Okay, you've declared an interest for this part of the meeting. Okay, so this is the report on an update on the Knoll Park Pods work. So Judith, apologies for earlier.
It's all right.
It's not certain.
I can actually hear you better now as well, which is good. Okay, so just in terms of this, I think we are a little bit disappointed on the progress that's been made on this. I mean, there've been a number of factors influencing it, partly to do with some of the negotiations we've had to do with leaseholders, but actually some of it's been around the planning process around the pods. And I think, just in terms of areas, I think if we'd learned a lesson sort of from our consultants, probably really didn't get to grips with the fact it was in a conservation area early enough in terms of the reports they were providing to planners and the reassurances they were giving them. What we have tried to do to sort of counteract the fact that the works have been delayed in terms of the pods themselves or the extensions has been around trying to divert works to some of the properties which don't have the extensions. So doing internal works to properties where we can do internal works where planning isn't influencing them, and also some preparatory asbestos works around the pods. So at the point they are removed, we're in a position to move forward quicker. So those sort of probably the main bits in the report I'd highlight, and the fact that actually, even though we have had the delays, we have recruited an apprentice to the site as well as an RLO who started, which is a positive in terms of the contractor sort of committing resource in advance of some of the issues being widened out. So really, any questions? Curtis Lee's here as well. He might answer the questions more because he's our Director of Asset Management and closer to the detail on some of the stuff on the pods.
Great, thank you very much, Judith. If I could just lead off on that, just looking at on page 30 of the report, paragraph 2.3, it says that it's been agreed with the planners that the planning application will be submitted in phases. The first planning application has now been submitted. So I suppose what interests me is how many phases and over what period, and when are when's this work going to be completed? When are the first residents going to be seeing their new pods installed and able to live in their homes with the new bathrooms, etc. So just a bit more clarity on timescale, really.
So I'll hand you over to Curtis for the real detail on that. We are intending on submitting the planning applications in quite quick succession once this first one goes through. So this first one we've been working very closely with the planners on to make sure all the documentation and the issues around the conservation area have been met. But once we get this one in, we'll be able to run the applications through quite quickly. But Curtis, do you want to go through the actual detail of that question?
No problem, thank you. We are submitting in 4 batches. 3 of the batches have already been submitted, with the final batch being submitted in about a week's time. Following that, we have booked a consultation with the leaseholders for the final batch for the 26th of March. So all of them, apart from one, have been submitted already.
Okay, thanks for that. And just when can we anticipate the works to be complete on the first homes and on the final homes?
Okay, so the expectation for the first batch of planning applications will be commencing from July this year, with the phase 1 of the overall programme due for completion February next year.
Okay, and the final phase?
Sorry, I cut out a bit slightly.
Phase.
The
Final phase.
Oh, perfect. Sorry. The final phase, pending the planning application being accepted as we are expecting, we should be on site from September this year, with completion due September next year.
Okay. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Any further questions from Bob?
Yeah, could you, I don't hope you can hear me, could you say how many leaseholders have accepted the council's offer of costs or whatever the offer was that was put to them?
So do you want me to come in a bit on that, Curtis, and you might need to follow up? So it's really, the council have been looking, and I don't know the exact numbers, which Curtis might be able to come in, but it's really been about the leaseholders coming back to the council to say whether they fit their criteria for the various offers. So some of the offers are around buybacks. There is the phasing of paying back the money. And so there's a sort of variety of offers depending on the individual circumstances. Do you know the numbers precisely, Curtis?
Sorry, I was just looking, but I haven't got the exact numbers at the moment because it's been changing on a day-to-day basis, to be honest with you, in which we have had some leaseholders who are adamant they would like to opt out of the works. And that's in a situation where we have a freehold building with 2 leaseholders. So effectively, they own 2 of the properties within a block. So it has been changing on a daily basis, to be honest with you.
We can follow up after the meeting with the exact figures as they stand at the moment and who's asked for and been accepted for which option.
Yeah, I would very much appreciate knowing the numbers of the different options and the numbers who've accepted, because at some point there will have to be a final number. I guess I don't know how the different phases of the podding are timed. But could I also ask, through you, Chair, the leaseholders were given, I understand, very little time to take a decision about potentially very large amounts of money. And I wonder why there was so little time given to them between the offers being made and them having to decide. Also, one of the problems for the leaseholders was that there was no guarantee in the overall costs, because the pod works had a guaranteed price, but other works that were deemed essential, whether it was front doors, roofs, windows, there was no guarantee in price. Therefore, not only were the sums very large, 6-figure sums, but the actual figures were not guaranteed. And I wonder why that couldn't be done to make it easier for the leaseholders to think about the sums involved.
So under leaseholder legislation, we have to follow the Section 20 process. So it's a very clearly set out legal process where we go out to tender. And then an assessment of the leaseholder costs are made as part of that open tender exercise. So there are costs which have been which are part of the tender for the leaseholder costs relating to the works which are in there, which are done by individual leaseholders depending on the works required to their individual properties, including the extensions. If there are variations during the build period, which there can be due to unforeseen things happening, then it's good practice if it goes over 10% variation to go back to the leaseholders. But generally, we've tried to be as pessimistic as we can, I think, on the costs, so that the leaseholder costs shouldn't go up unless there's something unforeseen which we haven't put into the process. Is there anything you want to add to that, Curtis?
I think you have covered everything, and I think it's also conscious just to make the point that there is a cap in place with leaseholders, so that will also take into effect. But as Judith has kind of alluded to, there are some anomalies that take place, but we do need to ensure not only do we get value for money, but we are getting quality for our residents and leaseholders.
So this is just a bit of a follow-up really to one of the responses that Curtis gave. I'm hoping I'm speaking toward a microphone. Sorry, it was Judith that made the comment about the you're trying to be pessimistic with the costs quoted to the leaseholders. So does that therefore mean that, for example, if you were pessimistic and you said to somebody it would cost them 60,000 and that came in under and it was more like 45, would they then get a refund of £15,000 or would it be knocked off their loan?
So yes, that's it. So it's all based on real costs. So generally, when we go out to leaseholder costs, we tend to, as I say, when I'm saying pessimistic, I'm probably put all the costs we think people might be incurred. So if you had an example of a roof, we might include for some roof trusses within there. If when we strip the roof, we find out the roof trusses are fine, that cost would be omitted from the works cost and therefore not passed on to the leaseholder.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any further questions from panel members? No. Okay, thank you very much, Judith, for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Okay, we'll just pause for a moment. Yeah, well, Councillor Ibrahim returns to the meeting.
No, Peter's online for this one.
Peter.
Yeah.
She's not next to me. I think where she is, so she moved back to class.
Oh, okay, fine. Then let's just.
Can we send her a text, anyone, just to let her know if she's in the loo or something?
It's probably smoking outside.
Yeah, that's what. I mean, number.
Okay. Okay, so next item on the agenda is on the council housing elements of the High Road West scheme. So, Peter, you're here to introduce this. Go ahead, please.
Good evening, everybody. Hi, councillors. So Sarah is actually going to talk us through a brief presentation, and of course you've got the report in your pack, and after that we'll be happy to take any questions that members may have.
Hi everybody, just checking that you can all see the presentation.
Yeah.
Great, okay. So as you'll be aware, Housing and Regen Scrutiny Panel previously looked at a number of different elements of the scheme. This paper and presentation focuses on, I guess, two key areas of questioning. Firstly, how do we ensure that the agreed number of council homes are actually going to be delivered through the High Road West scheme? And secondly, how do we ensure that they are going to be delivered in early phases and not all delivered in the last phase of development of the scheme? So just looking at the first question then, how are we going to ensure the new homes are being delivered? Well, there's, I guess, three key safeguards that I'm going to talk to you about, two of which are the key kind of critical contractual safeguards, which are the development agreement and the GLA funding contracts. And then the third is planning policy. So just delving into a little bit more detail then. So the development agreement is the key kind of contractual arrangement that the council has with Lendlease. It sets out the scheme's objectives and core requirements and the obligations of both parties. It's really important to note that the High Road West scheme is a phased development. So it means that that is a large site, each phase is going to come forward separately. And the DA is structured to ensure that that's allowed to happen. And what needs to happen is that a number of conditions, so phase conditions, need to be met by Lendlease before the council can give them the land and they can progress with development of the scheme. Now, this is really important because it's not the case that we're just giving them land and they can deliver out what they want. We have certain controls and we give them the land in phases. So certain phase conditions, for example, are planning. They need detailed planning for each of the phases. There's a GLA funding condition. They need to have secure funding. They need to have reached the milestone conditions. So we have within the development, for example, milestone conditions. So they have to have delivered certain elements of certain elements of the core requirements before they can get the next phase to allow them to give them the next phase for delivery. And they need to have met, for example, certain socio-economic outcomes in a phase before we'll let them take land for the next phase. So there's a number of conditions, a conditional agreement. One of the key things within the development agreement is the core requirements. So the core requirements set out the council's primary requirements for the scheme, and the core requirements have to be delivered. as part of the scheme. So the 500 council homes form part of the core requirements. In the original development agreement, we had 145 social rented homes, but with the subsequent agreements that we've now entered into with Lendlease pertaining to an increase in social homes, the additional homes are also, council homes I should say, are also dealt with as a core requirement. So the scheme cannot proceed unless those core requirements, those 500 council homes, are delivered. One way that we can ensure this, as an example, is, for example, as the planning reserve matters planning applications come forward for each phase, as a landowner, we get to approve that reserve matters planning application before it goes to the planning authority. So we can refuse that planning application and it doesn't proceed to the local planning authority if, as a landowner, we can see that that reserve matters planning application does not have the right number of social oriented homes, it's not delivering on the core requirements, and isn't being brought forward in conformity with the outline planning application, which is obviously currently going through the planning process. So that means that we will not give them the land, we will not let them proceed unless we know that each phase is getting the right number of social rented houses, homes. So that's the development agreement. In terms of the second kind of key contractual element that we have, it's the GLA funding contract. So the GLA funding contract sets out that the council and Lendlease will deliver a certain number of affordable homes. Happens to be kind of just over 500. It's 500 social rented homes, but we've also got a small number of other affordable homes as well. And it sets out that we have to deliver those, and we have to deliver those by certain timescales and certain milestones. If we don't deliver those homes by certain timescales, then the GLA can withdraw their funding, which obviously means that the scheme can't progress. So it's really critical for the High Road West scheme to deliver those social rented homes, or it doesn't get the funding it needs for the scheme to go forward. It's also just one thing that I'd like to kind of provide some assurance around is that not only has the council done its own due diligence around the schemes, but the GLA, before entering into these funding contracts where they're giving us a substantial amount of public sector funding, so £90 million worth of funding, they did an extensive due diligence process where they looked at the financial kind of rigour of the scheme and tested a number of scenarios before they were able and comfortable to sign off that this scheme could deliver these homes, and they were willing to invest. So a significant amount of due diligence has happened. These two contractual safeguards, so the GLA funding and the development agreements, supported by planning, which also kind of provides a safeguard in that we're not going to get planning approval for the outline planning application, and certainly not for each of the reserve matters planning applications, if we're not delivering affordable homes as per planning policy. So planning policy requires that we provide the existing. Under the local plan, we need to maximise affordable homes across the site. At the moment, High Road West across phase A and phase B, so the whole scheme is targeting 40%. But phase A has already is already kind of committed to delivering 40% affordable homes, of which 500 of those will be council homes. So just moving on to the second question then, how do we ensure that those homes are built early and not last? They're not built in the last phase of the scheme. Well, again, we've got three safeguards. We've got the GLA funding contract, we've got the development agreement, and then the third thing that we have is the phasing commitments and phasing plan. So just in terms of the funding contract, as already alluded to, the GLA are giving us £90 million to deliver kind of phase A of the development, which means that as part of the first few phases of High Road West, we'll be securing 500 council homes. We have agreed within the GLA contract a number of milestone dates, and we have to deliver or started on site for those council homes by certain dates. So these milestone conditions that are embedded in the GLA contract ensure that we need to be delivering the council homes, the affordable homes by certain timescales. We cannot leave it all to the end of the scheme. That would not be acceptable for the GLA. They need those housing starts. The second element is the development agreement. There's a number of mechanisms for the council within the development agreement to review and approve key elements of the scheme. So, for example, the replacement homes proposal, Lendlease need to suggest to the council as landowner where the social rented homes are going to be, and we can reject any replacement homes proposal if it doesn't align or doesn't agree with the rehousing strategy that the council has and the agreed phasing plan which we have. Secondly, we have again the reserve planning application process. So the council can, as landowner, refuse or not be forthgiving with our approval for a planning application if that planning application is not delivering the core requirements, including the 500 homes, in line with what we have in the development agreement and what we have in the outline planning application. So again, that's another mechanism for which we will not allow the phase to proceed unless we're comfortable with the level of social housing that's going to be in that phase. Just if the council does kind of refuse that planning approval, what wouldn't happen is that Lendlease would need to go back, redraw the planning application, work on it to ensure that they meet the council's requirements and come back again. So that's kind of the key contractual safeguards we have to ensure that they're not going to be delivered last. The kind of key third element is to do with kind of the phasing commitments and the phasing plan that we have in place, and also just the practicalities of the physicality of the estate. So we are not talking about a development site that is cleared, which a development partner can just build out as they see fit. This is predominantly an estate, the Loveling estate, which is tenanted, which is the first few phases. So phase A. We have 220 tenants, we have 45 leaseholders, and we've through kind of many years of discussions with the community agreed a number of phasing commitments which were enshrined in the landlord offer, which include minimising disruption to residents and maximising the number of residents that move from their current home into their new social rented council-owned home on the Loveling estate. To meet that commitment that we've kind of written down in the landlord offer and the council stood behind, we have to build social housing early. So, for example, one of the ways we're doing this is that this is the phasing plan within the Loveling landlord offer. The first plots, plot A, we're building at 100% social rented homes. That then allows for residents in phase 2 to move across. Frees up development land. We then allow Lendlease to build homes and build the development, including social rented homes, for people from phase 2 to move into, and so on. If those social rented homes were not delivered, the land is not freed up for development in the first place. So social rented homes have to be delivered in the early phases. We don't have enough voids as a council. We had 350 last year. We don't have enough as a council to just say we're going to rehouse everybody off the estate and then bring them all back. We'd never do that, and that wouldn't mean that we're aligning with our agreed commitments to minimise disruption to the community and keep the community together as much as possible. So they're the kind of 3 safeguards for each of the 2 questions, and that's the end of my presentation. That's okay.
Thank you very much for that presentation, that update. I've seen Charles has a question.
Great, thank you very much, Sarah, for the presentation. I'm pleased about the front loading of the council's aspect, because there's been rumours that Lendlease planning application had apparently alluded to the council aspect being the last to be built. But your presentation obviously is clarified that point. I'm wondering if there's been anything further that the council can do to set the record straight, as it were, in terms of the misinformation that's been put out there. So that's that. And then the other thing I think that I think we got members of the panel got an email from TAG. I was wondering if the points raised in the email to members of the panel can be addressed, not necessarily tonight, but in some form to clarify the points in terms of whether there is information or correct or not. In terms of the project, obviously, I understand their apprehension and concerns, but maybe we can find a way of reassuring them. But most importantly, my main concern was the fact that which your presentation did cover. I mean, looking at paragraphs 3.4 and 4, I think of the document, and your presentation actually did cover that. But maybe if we can just put that out, just to address some of those concerns and misinformation that's come out.
Okay, just to clarify quickly, in case anyone's viewing this that doesn't know, TAG refers to, I think, the Love Lane Tenants Action Group. Is it Action?
Temporary Accommodation Group.
Oh, it's Temporary Accommodation Group.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. I was okay.
It's Temporary Accommodation
Just to
Group.
clarify who that group is.
The Love Lane Temporary Accommodation Group. That's
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah. So
that's it. And statement and obviously points and comments. Just a clarification, because it's obviously not very helpful. And the whole project, obviously, we got more social housing from the scheme, about 500 from 140 something. So, but then with the rumors stating that, oh well, it will be towards the end, but clearly that's not the case. The development agreement doesn't allow that. The planning doesn't allow that. So all those points need to be put right. Thank you.
So was there a question in there somewhere? No.
Yeah, I did ask the question.
Yes.
So when is it going to be put right in terms of the misinformation, as it were?
Okay. So
I think just very quickly, Chair, I think we'll have to kind of pick up with colleagues, because I'm not sure we're cited on the letter in question. So by all means, Councillor Chair, we're very happy to kind of respond to it, but I'm not sure officers have seen the letter in question. So I'll have to check with colleagues in Democratic Services and see if we can do that. But very happy to kind of respond in writing to any further points that are raised by that we can assist with, basically. I mean, you've heard from Sarah that the absolute determination is to get as many council residents rehoused as quickly as is humanly possible, and so that is very much the determination of everybody working on the scheme.
Chair, through you, just to reaffirm that in terms of the point that Sarah made about the reserved matters, that those issues can also be dealt with under the reserved matters, that the council element will be built first. So I just wanted that to be confirmed, so to provide reassurance to the residents and the of Love Lane, TAG, as well as the whole of the borough. But the scheme does provide, and obviously the mayor's office, in terms of the development agreement and funding, requires the front loading of council properties. Yes?
Correct. And as Sarah outlined, Councillor, you're absolutely right to stress the role of planning in this as kind of the third part. And we've also got those two other separate measures, the GLA and their funding agreement, and indeed the council's own development agreement, all of which come together to provide those safeguards that Sarah described.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Do panel members have any further questions on this item?
Yeah.
Paul.
Just on whether you've got a sort of risk analysis, risk register of the potential for either delays in a phase, or what are the, do you have some of the risks that you see to delivering on time and delivering the project?
So it won't surprise members that on a project of this scale and size and nature that we are actively monitoring kind of a variety of different risks in relation to the project, and of course have been for some time. I mean, I think some of the things that are quite topical at the moment, obviously, we have a planning application date on March 17th. That's a very, very, very big day for the scheme itself. Following that, there's issues around kind of what we call vacant possession, and that means kind of securing the site for redevelopment. And there's a lot of work that's involved in getting to that. So an example that members may recall from recent discussions is the Grace Centre, and that is one of the earliest sites where we need to secure a vacant possession so that the first phase can go on to be built. So we do a lot of work in looking around kind of our vacant possession strategy to ensure that we can free up land at the right time. And then I suppose, generally speaking, although this is not a risk that the council itself holds as such, it's rather a kind of a risk for Lend Lease, and one that everybody's watching, is that the wider industry at the moment, of course, there's an awful lot of construction inflation going on at the moment. So that's something we're all sort of keenly watching, and indeed, along with other colleagues elsewhere in the directorate as well. It's a big focus for all of us right now. So that's a bit of a flavour of some of the main risks that we're kind of watching at the moment.
Chair, could I just follow up? I'm aware that we all are, I think, that Spurs own a small amount of land on site. Do you see that as creating any potential for either holding the council over a barrel, or do you think they will work very cooperatively with you?
So, Councillor Hare, you're absolutely right that Spurs own a relatively modest land holdings to the south of White Hart Lane. That area is subject to a CPO in as much as any other landholder's interest would be. We would hope, as with any party, and indeed are legally required to do our level best to acquire through agreement as opposed to utilising the CPO. We would very much hope that we'd be in a position to agree that with Spurs. In the event that we didn't, we would have to ultimately CPO the interest in the same way we would any other party. So, you know, from a kind of purely from a scheme perspective, rather than perhaps commenting on the kind of wider relationship dimensions, we're very clear on kind of what we need to do in order to ensure that the first phase of the scheme can come forward.
Thanks very much.
Hang on. Charles, one more question.
Yeah, thanks for that. Whilst just following up on Bob's question, while not wanting to preempt what the discussions is taking place with regards to Spurs and their site, where are we obviously in the scheme of things in terms of the time frame, so where, and if we were to go down the route of CPO, we hope we don't go down that route. How long do you envisage that is likely to take and its impact on the scheme?
Sarah,
So
go ahead, Sarah.
yeah, sure. So we've so the scheme has phase A is progressing, and we will be we know that the first phases. So the first phase being plot A, which is the current Grace Centre and Whitehall Lodge. We know we can progress with that CPO, and that can get going. But there is a risk around the rest of the site, and for that reason, based on our risk register, we are progressing our mitigation, and the mitigation is a CPO process. We need to, so that we don't have delays in the council homes, need to expedite the CPO process, and we'll be seeking to go to Cabinet in June, asking the Cabinet to make a CPO resolution to allow us to start the CPO process. We're already doing significant amounts of work with the community in phase A, which will be subject to the first CPO, to get them ready for that. So questionnaires have gone out, a number of letters have gone out, and we're having detailed negotiations with all of those affected. So we're envisaging that we'll start with the Cabinet kind of paper in June. It's likely to take 18 to 24 months. So that takes us into 2024, and by which time we should have finished plot A, and we'll be turning our attention to the rest of the plots. So that's the time scale for which we are working towards.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. And if there are no further questions from panel members, thank you very much, Peter and Sarah, for that update. And I think we just need a quick to go over the work plan. So officers, Councillor Bevan are free to leave now, if they wish. Thank you very much. You don't want me to stay?
No, we don't.
We're pretty much at the end.
Stay if you want.
I mean, there's nothing else better to do.
Enjoy the rest of the evening.
We're finishing relatively early this evening, so we just got the work programme. Obviously, this is the last meeting we're having as a panel, and I know some of the panel members are standing down in May, and those of us who are standing for re-election at least still need to face the voters. So obviously, and of course, we don't know how responsibilities in the council might change after May. That's all to be decided yet. So obviously, there will definitely be changes in the makeup of this panel after May. So just thank you very much to panel members for everything you've done over the last year. Thank you very much to Philip and to Dominic for him for all the hard work in supporting the panel. And is there anything we need to cover on the
Not really, it's just to formally note the work programme, obviously, it's at the end of the process. So, yeah, that was the work programme for last year. And just a small plea to to Councillor Hare and yourself, if we get a chance to have a quick look through the review report on what's going on, if you have any comments, let me know by Wednesday.
Yep.
Okay.
It's very exciting.
Thank you very much. The meeting is closed. Thank you very much.
When did you lose it?
Because my laptop doesn't work, I can't reset the password. I have to phone my teacher to do it.